Tycoon games are a personal favourite of mine. Admittedly, shipping tycoons not so much, since they are few and far between. Railroad tycoons are generally my favourite, but all transport tycoons are pretty cool. Will TransOcean 2 float along with the others, or will it sink to the bottom? Welcome to Total Reviews, the web show where we take a look at games of interest and see if they really are worth a purchase, in partnership with Games Planet, where you can purchase games like our choice today at a discounted rate from an officially licensed game seller. Today I take a look at TransOcean 2 Rivals, the sequel to the Deck 13 Hamburg game TransOcean the Shipping Company. Jumping into the game, my first concern was a long loading time, which does tend to be throughout the game, not just on initial startup. Taking a look at the specs, I was a little surprised, as recommended specs are quite high, showing the need of an i5-3570K processor at 3.4 GHz, 8GB of RAM and a GTX 760 graphics card, or equivalent, as well as 8GB of hard drive space. Looking at the main menu, once it loaded up, it looked like a nice polished main menu with nice touches of moving sprites, but again, this was just eye candy. Options look good, with custom graphics options available and lots of sound options, as well as a few gameplay options and customization of the game's controls. So far, apart from the long loading times, it looked positive. Before starting any game, you had to make a profile, which is very easy. You pick a name, an avatar, a logo and a company colour. Really as simple as that. And once you've done that, you had 3 single player game modes available to you, as well as a multiplayer mode, which unfortunately does not have that many players playing anymore. The store page for TransOcean states the following about the game. TransOcean 2 Rivals, the second chapter of the successful business simulation TransOcean, offers days of entertainment play in either alone or 3 single player modes, campaign, endless game and competition, or with friends in a thrilling competitive multiplayer mode. Get started with your newly founded shipping line, should I say, in one of 60 ports and begin your career with a small fleet of worn out old feeders, the smallest type of ship in TransOcean 2. Choose your port wisely and complete your first contracts to nearby ports in order to generate your first funds. Conduct your business with brains, plan your voyages with foresight, and don't underestimate external factors like the price of oil or your rivals' companies. This is how you will slowly expand your fleet and establish subsidiaries across the whole world. Are you up to mastering the challenges? A livelier economic system influencing all kinds of goods ensures that TransOcean 2 Rivals you will be faced with macroeconomic challenges. With 3 types of ships, tankers, container ships and bulk carriers, you have even more options to specialize and take your company to the top. Challenge your rivals and develop your own global business enterprise. In the single player mode, you can give yourself a very unique challenge. Steer your ships directly in a variety of 3D environments when the tugboats go on strike and the going gets tough. Can you maneuver both small and large vessels undamaged through the harbour basin? Fair enough. It sounds kind of exciting. It sounds quite nice. I wasn't too sold on it, but I thought, yeah, that's quite okay. So I started with the campaign. And I really liked the fact that the introduction all has voice acting to it, which is a really nice touch, and it comes complete with a tutorial, which I did use because I didn't really know how to play the game and I didn't really have time to just fiddle around with things. Admittedly though, I found the tutorial really annoying, so I couldn't wait for it to be switched off once I'd worked out how to play the game. The first mission on the campaign was also quite dull, but I suppose that this is to make sure that new players to the game would be able to get used to how it all works. I would have liked to see a bit more than 6 chapters though. I mean, even if they did take a little bit of time. Nevertheless, it's an interesting story which seems to continue some years after the events of the original TransOcean game. In many ways, that reminded me of Railroad Tycoon with its campaign that went through the ages, and since I like that title so much, I was looking forward to seeing what else was available in this one. Most of my testing was done in the sandbox game, so I could play around with different aspects to see what I could do and what I could not do. I have to admit there are aspects to the game that are not all that intuitive, but most of the gameplay aspects are. As I started playing, I started getting a bit more of a vibe of Railroad Tycoon, in where you have to build a commercial empire of some sort. But it did feel a little too simple, perhaps just too simplified. The basic premise of the game is to get a ship, of which there are 3 types, and transport goods from port to port. To do this, you often start with one ship and a home port, which I chose as Felixstowe in my sandbox, and you need to work out how to ship goods from there and make a decent profit. But it's not exactly as simple as that. As you take on more and more jobs, you need to keep an eye on your fuel levels, the hull condition of your ship, the time it takes to get from port to port, and at what speed you're going to do. At first it seemed to be a little bit boring, but once you get into it, it does become a fair amount of fun, with some thought-provoking processes. Graphically, the game was very impressive, with lots of detail at the ports. Each little area was also very nicely detailed, such as the world map, with both normal and schematic views, and the upgrade ports, the wharf, and everything, all such areas where you found yourself going into. Sounds were also fairly well done, though they were a little bit repetitive after a while, which does get annoying when you spend a whole bunch of time in a port trying to work out what you're doing. But I have to mention quite special props here to the orchestral soundtrack. I think that was really, really fancy. Very epic style music, very, very nice. Once I got more into the game, I started taking a look at places like upgrade docks, working at how customizable your ships are. Honest to that, it's actually fairly okay. You can add specific upgrades to your ships to reduce tugboat costs, or to allow you to transport other types of goods, or to travel faster on the open seas. It's all quite nicely detailed, though I never really saw any of the upgrades make the ships look any different, which was a little sad. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, the ships are so small on the screen in the port, you really would not be able to notice a difference between ships of the same class. So I can understand why they wouldn't do that. The game also has a mode in which you have to steer your ship in and out of the docks. At first this seemed pretty interesting, but after a few tries it gets a bit tedious. The ships handle really poorly, and whilst graphically it's nice, the actual gameplay in that aspect is not well executed. I think the best way to describe the ship handling physics would be steering a bathtub. Yeah, it's a bit like steering a bathtub. Marks down for TransOcean there, I'm afraid. The AI in the game is a little bit interesting. During the campaign, they seem to be smart and tough in some ways, but when you get to the sandbox game, they just seem to be there to keep you company. The only real challenge that you face from them is that they may purchase various docks and tugboat companies from around the world, meaning that you will be paying a percentage to them as you use those facilities. But really, overall, it didn't change much, as your contracts are different to them and the payments to the other companies aren't really that great. So it didn't feel like the system was originally it felt like the system was originally planned to be far more in depth, but then it feels like it was scaled back to cater to a larger audience, and that makes me a little bit sad. Given everything about the game, I have to give it a solid 72 to 75 out of 100. The visuals are really, really nice. The campaign is a little slow to start with, but can be quite engaging, and the gameplay in itself, whilst lacking in too much depth, has enough to give quite a few hours of enjoyment as you start micromanaging a whole fleet of ships and working out just what's going to make what, where and how. It does fall short of my ultimate expectations though, as I feel there could be so much more done, and this game had so much more potential. Nevertheless, if you do like tycoon games and have a decent amount of patience to get something going, this is worth a purchase. And if you'd like to purchase this title, then take a look in the link in the description box below and support me here, as well as bagging yourself a tidy discount on Games Planet. Sink or swim, TransOcean 2 swims, and fairly decently too.